Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop. This is my workbench. It is a split top Roubo, and workbenches like these have become fairly popular in the last few years. If you want to learn more about a workbench, I will leave you a link to a video I did all about it, and you can fill in yourself with all those little details on how all of this stuff on here works and whatnot. Now the biggest kind of thing with these style of workbenches is that they are laminated. So you have a bunch of strips of wood that are laminated together to make the top as well as the base. And that is where a ton of the time goes when you're building a workbench like this. You're going to spend probably like a third of the time of the entire build just laminating stuff. For my build, for example, when I was still like tracking the time I put into this build, it took me 27 hours to get to the point where I had this slab glued up and ready to go, and the front slab glued up and ready to go for all of the other stuff in here. So that's really just ripping big boards down into strips, flattening all those boards, plating all those boards, gluing those boards into a big block, and then flattening and surfacing the big block after all that. Ton of work. So one of the really interesting things that could happen here is instead of making these out of a bunch of laminated boards, having it out of one solid piece of wood, so you can get your big block of wood, get that thing flattened, and save yourself a ton of time with all of the prep work that goes into that. So there's a couple of things to think about with this process. Normally when we're going to be slicing up a wider board into a bunch of strips, we're taking basically a plain sawn board and cutting that up, turning those boards on end, and essentially creating a quarter sawn slab, or at least that's the gist of the idea. In reality, it doesn't really work out that way. So you can see on mine, my grain orientation is kind of all over the place, but ideally you'd have a vertical growth ring orientation that way. So with the quarter sawn orientation, you're going to direct more of the movement into the thickness of the board rather than the width. So in the case of the bench top, you don't really want a whole lot of movement in the width because you have it attached to the stretchers. You have a gap here in the middle for your clamps or whatever. So ideally, you don't want this dimension to change too much. Changing the thickness is not a huge deal. The other thing that a quarter sawn will give you is a little bit more inherent stability in your bench top, so it's not going to have as much tendency to possibly cup or twist or bow. So we know conventional drawing makes this product, a single piece of wood for a bench top, somewhat unfeasible. However, with the advent of vacuum drying and all of that magic, it actually might be a lot more feasible and possible to create the raw stock for a workbench, both the top and the base, all out of a single block of wood and make that somewhat available. The top here, mine happens to be a little over 4.5 inches thick. We're going to rough saw out our blanks at 6 inches thick, which should end up with a finished thickness of 5 after shrinking and after surfacing. And then for the stock for the base, that is all plain sawn. So we have an orientation that matches the orientation of the top, and those are they're going to be roughed out at 4 inches thick, and they finish at 3.5. So that's what I'm going to try and do today. We're going to cut up a log, and we're going to make some bench parts out of it. So here is our sample log, which we're going to saw for our test bench tops. It is about 40 inches of diameter down here at the butt, and it's 36 up there towards the top of the log. So here is the pith right here, and if this was a little more cleaned up, you'll be able to see that the growth rings go in a circle here, and ideally for that quarter sawn top, we'd want the growth rings to be as vertical as possible. So that's not going to happen until you get kind of further out from the pith. So figure about 6 inches here in the middle is going to be essentially a waist area. So if we come over 3 inches from there and we come out, you know, we got 14 to right about here where we'd be able to clean up and get rid of the bark. So we have just enough wiggle room in here to create the perfect bench top in theory. So we'll pull basically a 6-inch thick slab that's centered around the pith over here, and then be able to pull some other stuff from the top and the bottom. So this is where the base stuff is going to come from. And then because I have a lot of material here, which we're not really going to need, I'm also going to just saw some slab skins out of here, so we have some more sample skins to play with as well. Now because I do have the butt swell in here still, I've leveled things out a little bit by raising this end up so the pith is roughly in line with the cut path of the blade. Now this log doesn't really have anything too crazy going on. For a bench top, you don't really want any kind of crazy things going on, so this is a very straight grain log. There's no notable figure or I don't know, anything that would be all that exciting at this point. It should be a very boring log, which is perfect for this use. So this log comes courtesy of my buddy Eric. I have some footage here that we'll take a look at of loading this thing and bringing it back here and getting it onto the saw. And you guys can take a look at that while I am getting the saw ready to go, because it hasn't run in about 6 months. It hasn't run since October. It's currently March. And that's basically just a fancy way of me saying I'm gonna go get a blade and put it on here. And that's really it. I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see if this thing still works. To tell you the truth, I wasn't really worried. I didn't really build this saw to be is it not going to work after 6 months of sitting here idle? Let's get this saw set to the right height to get the waste out of here, and then we'll make some bench base cuts. Those would be 16/4, 4 inches thick, and we'll kind of see where we're going to go from there. Maybe I'll pull a couple of slabs like that first, and then grab a few slab skins for us to play with. But the thing I'm really excited about is going to be when we get down to the pith area and start making that giant slab. So I think it's going to be easier with these to put a straight edge on here with the beam saw than trying to stand this thing up and stabilize it on the sawmill to make these edging cuts. So I'm going to grab a chalk line here and make myself a little bit of a guideline, and then we'll just rip this stupid live edge off and move on. Oh, it was just that well supported. So as I was moving that last slab off with the machine, I did kind of bump this, and it is kind of tipped now. So before actually making some more cuts, it's going to be easier to just roll this thing over than trying to kind of roll it back to its original position. So I'm going to try and do that with machines, see if we do that. Otherwise, go back to the old snatch block and a tree and chain technique. So for the next cut, we're going to pull a piece that's 3 1/4. It's going to give Eric a lot of stock for table legs. And I know you guys are cringing because it's going to get ripped into little square stock, but that's how woodworking works. You start with big pieces of wood and they get smaller. So let's make a slab for ripping. pretty heavy. I mean,
Can you handle it?
it is crazy how light this stuff is. So now I can rip the actual sections out of here, so I do want to remove a good amount of this pith. You can see the growth rings are still pretty sharp through here. So I'm going to come over 3 inches in both directions to essentially make a 6x6 waste area in the middle, and we'll rip those sections out of it. And once those cuts are done, I'll set this aside and we'll do the final edging on the sawmill, but at least it'll be more manageable at this point. So here is what remains. We're at a little over 8 inches thick, and this is a pretty huge piece of wood. So we've got a solid 36 inches in width here, and yeah, this is pretty cool. I got kind of get into this bar conclusion here, which is pretty sweet. So this is what's left. I'm gonna pull 4 more slab skins off of here to go with the last 4 that we just cut, and that'll leave me with a big chunk on the bottom, which I will probably clean up and either have some more stuff for base stock, or I'll cut it for Eric for his square leg stock. Yeah, that's nice. Didn't think I'd go all the way through a video and not get my trusty water bucket out. Oh, this is a really nice slab. I really wanted to cut this to the slab because this stuff is pretty ridiculous. So let's take a quick look. I'm all about diverse offerings here. We got slabs, we got giant slabs, we got thin slabs. This has got some really nice bar conclusion stuff going on over here with some really interesting green and color, texture and stuff. Just some absolutely beautiful pink and some greens and some yellows. And because this log was sitting for a bit, a little bit of spalting down here. But overall, just pretty darn nice. So that's a standard thickness slab, and that leaves me with this stock down here for base material. So I'll pull this smaller slab off this bigger one, and we'll get these ones edged. And I think we'll cut the base stock first into its rectangular stock. So that should be enough stock for a lot of bases. That's a whole heck of a lot of legs and a whole heck of a lot of stretchers. And I guess if the big thick ones don't work out, you can laminate 3 of these together and have your 3 slab, single slab thing. This guy here is enough for a leg, so I'll get trimmed down, but that's a lot of base stock. So I'll move these things out of the way, get them put away somewhere, bring in the thicker ones, and we'll do the trimming cuts on those to square them up. Okay, so that takes care of our bench top slabs. So since I had some extra material here, I did saw these a little bit on the conservative side, so they're 14 inches wide right now. So roughly 2 inches of extra material there for surfacing and whatnot. So that's it. We got a blank for a workbench. A bench top. So I have another log here to keep producing some more material for workbenches, and I definitely underestimated the amount of material we can get for our, for a base out of the other sawing method. So that produces enough material for probably like 4, at least 3, maybe 4 workbench bases, at least that. So on the second log, I'm just gonna be creating quarter sawn bench tops. So I have 4 of them laid out here. And this log is actually kind of small for this, so it's going to be probably a little bit tight. So the kind of strategy here is going to be to make this facing cut here and then come down and remove this entire section right here, get that taken off the saw. That may shift this whole bottom section around as we're trying to move this, so I may have to flip this over first and then make the second cut through here, producing the first 2, just like we did last time with these 2 that are nested together. Cut away the pith area out of both of those. Those can be set aside, and then I'll have this remainder down here and then this up here. I will probably, maybe I'll flip this one and put it back on. I don't know, but there's gonna be a lot of moving big stuff around for this, so this should be pretty interesting. So unless something crazy happens, enjoy the montage and I'll see you at the end. Hopefully it's a successful ending. there we go, 4 more bench tops ready to go for drying. This was like just as much work, like time-wise, as all the other cuts in the other log. Even though it's yielded more bench tops, same amount of actual time doing the work for what that's worth. So yeah, these are gonna go off to be dried next, but first let's take a look at some beautiful quarter sawn silver maple. Yeah, that's pretty nice. I think if this works, I'm gonna have to make myself a new bench. So there's the general look of things. You can kind of see up here where the sun's not too bright, but you get some really nice straight grain stuff. A little bit of ray fleck here and there. It's a nice subtle ray fleck. This stuff is pretty darn nice looking. Very uniform. This one here's got a weird limb, so it does have some cool like figure around it, but that's kind of cool in itself. And these are really nice. I really hope these things work out. So these things just came back from drying and they turned out absolutely perfectly. That was the biggest question in my mind, is was it going to be able to go through the drying process without totally exploding, and is it going to be able to be dried evenly? And spoiler alert, it did, and it's perfect, and it's amazing. So I brought the whole stack of stuff over to my friend Eric's place. He has a vacuum kiln, and that's what we use to actually dry all this wood. I've talked about the vacuum kiln in the past on the channel, but real quick, it is an airtight chamber that allows you to pull a vacuum on the contents, in this case wood, which is going to lower the boiling point of water. So it actually releases from the wood a lot more evenly, a lot more quickly, and a lot more, I guess, uniformly. This kiln uses hot water plates between each layer of wood to evenly heat the wood while it's in there. Since there is a vacuum drawn on the chamber, there's no air in there, or there's very little air, so you can't rely on air to actually heat the wood to get it to that boiling point. There's a couple different ways to actually heat the wood under deep vacuum. The hot water plates is one way, and the other way you might have seen is with radio frequency. Now normally for the stuff that Eric dries, the kiln will run for like a couple of days. That's all it's needed for, 1 inch or 1 1/4 inch thick boards. But for these, we took it slow and did a 12-day dry. And after 12 days, we pulled these things out and we had some sample areas that we could cut apart and check for the moisture content. So in both cases, on both the 4x6s for the base and for the 6x for the tops, once we cut those things apart, they were dry in the center, which is probably one of the most surprising and important things with drying thick stuff like this. Being able to get these things dried in a realistic time frame is pretty critical to making this a actual marketable product. Otherwise, through traditional methods for the bench tops, you're probably looking at about a 4-year drying cycle for those, which is a long time to hold on to inventory. Now another thing you could do is you could be like the I guess the old woodworkers back in the day. They would just use these things green, and they would allow them to warp and distort as they're being used for their bench. Whenever it distorts, just pull it to hand plane and bring it back in the flat and continue on with your life. I know for most people that's probably not super practical. You probably want to flatten your workbench once in your life, so having an actual dry slab to start with is going to be a better solution for most people. I will be selling these bench top kits, or bench kits I guess, the tops with the bases. Those are going to be on sort of a special order type of arrangement. So I'll be taking a deposit, and then once the bench tops are ready, I'll get in hold of you and we can take care of shipping and the remaining balance. And I'll do those in sort of batches throughout the year. So the supply is going to be fairly limited. But if you're interested in that, I will leave you a link down in the description of how you can reserve your bench slab and get some more information on that. I am super thrilled this actually worked, and also pretty darn surprised that it went this absolutely perfectly. There is no drying defects at all. So the exact condition of the wood as it came out of the log is exactly the condition of the wood as it came through drying. So the only defects I have in some of these were structural defects which were in the log when it was being sawn. So those are, the funny thing about those too is that a lot of times with structural defects inside of logs, you can't see them because they're not showing on the outside of the log or on the end grain. But until you saw into them, then you find them. But even the ones I encountered don't seem like they're going to be a huge deal. These 2 kits are going off. This pair down here is going to Andy Klein. He's making a bench for Adam Savage. If you want to check that out, I will leave you a link to that as well. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on the bench top kits, anything on the sawmill, anything back in the shop, please feel free to leave me a comment, as well as to be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.